Do you want to prop it up on something?
I think it'll be very sort of guerrilla, sort of like...
What is that? Is it filming actually using a camera?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, okay.
So I'll film there and we'll talk and it'll pick up some sound, and then once I get some food out we can talk about it.
Okay, alright.
Because, like I say, food is something which is increasingly important to architecture, cities, how we live, how we are communal, and by extension of that sort of exist, especially with the challenges we're facing all from everywhere. Geopolitics, COVID, environment.
Yeah.
And with food, because I used to work for many years in a Jewish community centre, so I know full well from there how important food is as a sort of a communal and a cultural artefact, and also as a trigger for memory. And it was really interesting when you said in an email that, but it was 7 years ago. I don't know if I can remember that much. I did a lot of talks at that time. And that's kind of fine for me.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked it up, and the reality was they wanted me to go for, I think, 2 nights, and I couldn't because I was doing some talk somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I literally did one of these fly-in, speak and fly-out jobs. And funnily enough, I mean, I hadn't remembered that talking about that pickle was in Oslo. You know, I mean, I know that image because it keeps flashing up at me, every time I search myself, and I don't do sort of, I knew they were filming me and it was all a bit staged and a bit weird. They said, pick an object from the exhibition and talk about it, and of course I picked food, and I just happened to come across a jar of pickles, and as you can say, a pickle, they're only there because... I literally, they've been there for a week. I haven't actually had time to label them and put them away, which is sort of insane. But anyway, there we go.
So this received memory as much as a memory of yourself.
It's a sort of that thing of when you look at photographs of yourself as a child, and there's just certain photos in the album, and they then become the anchors of what you take to be your memory, but who knows whether it's your real memory or just...
Totally.
Anyway. But interestingly, that reminded me of a big exhibition hall with lots of interesting stuff in. So I do have an actual real memory of that.
Which wasn't present until maybe you'd thought about it this week when you were...
Well, until I realised that pickle film was made in Oslo.
Yeah.
And if I really struggle, I can remember sort of being driven to that venue past some quite interesting, I think a park maybe, and maybe a little... peasant's hutty looking thing. That's literally all there is, and maybe a lake. Is there a lake there? There was a meal somewhere.
What do you remember of that meal? Anything?
Pretty much nothing, I think. And the thing is, I can conjure up meals that I've had at conferences in Scandinavia, and then I wouldn't know whether what I'm remembering is actually Oslo.
So I actually have found some photos here of the food that was served up at the conference on that day.
Oh, okay. Well,
so I don't know if that triggers any memories. You can scroll left and right as well, if in case there's anything which... This is, from what I understand, to be the conference day anyway. You're certainly in some of the photos, but not with the food.
Yeah, I think I do remember that we all... I think it was quite cold. And there was a salad bar or something. Yeah, I remember that. I remember being there. Yeah, I remember being there. How interesting. Gosh, how interesting.
When I worked out that I was going to be walking here, I thought, where can I buy Norwegian food in London? So I typed it into Google, and there's a Norwegian food shop, exactly on the route, just off Regent Street.
It was meant to be.
So it was meant to be. I was told they didn't have any Norwegian breads, but they generally eat Swedish bread in Norway anyway. So there's some...
Oh, how lovely. I'm half Finnish, so I sort of, some of this kind of food is in my culture, as it were.
Excellent.
How lovely.
There's some salmon. This is
good thing you didn't have to take plates cheese. All the way. Gosh. Is this that smoked cheese?
No. It was the cheapest one, but they also said it was the most popular.
Okay. All right, well, let's lay out a bit of food then.
Yeah, I was interested in these Norwegian Spanish paprika crisps, and the idea of how, food which used to be sort of, indigenous. So I'm from Suffolk on the East Coast, and when we went to have mussels there with my boyfriend a few years ago, they taste just like I remember the smell of the rivers from my childhood, and they're very different to other rivers, and how food sort of carries with that particular local or childhood memory. But then, the idea of Norwegian crisps which have a Spanish proviso in a globalised world where, what is sort of national identity.
Oh yeah, I mean, food's incredibly evocative. I mean, you can't be flippant about food. The relationship with it is so deep. And as you say, because it's to do with smell, which of course is the primary sense in memory, it's just, it's always, hitting you between the eyeballs kind of thing. And as you say, I mean, we have far, far more tastes stored in our brains than we realise.
Really?
So that thing of, as you say, you walk past someone and go, oh my God, that smells like the river did by my childhood home.
Yeah.
You didn't know that you had the smell of the river by
stored.
your child. Yeah, but it's stored. I mean, literally you've got millions and millions of smells stored in our brains. and this is the Proust Madeleine moment, if you know, I mean, the classic, he bites into a Madeleine and suddenly his entire childhood comes flooding back. I mean, it's a real phenomenon.
Lovely noise they make.
Well, I mean, rye crackers can slightly taste like cardboard, but these ones actually have a bit of wryness to them, don't they? That's delicious. And the gravadlax is delicious.
And the colours are lovely as well.
Beautiful,
Beetroot
yeah.
mix.
Look at those. I wouldn't mind having a shirt in those colours.
Yeah.
It's quite. Oh gosh, I don't know. I really do feel like I'm on holiday. Because you never order something like this.
No.
In normal life. Cheers.
Oh, it's like Fanta. It smells.
Yeah.
When I was a child, I did love having Orangina when I was abroad. Because it made me know I was in Belgium or France, and that was exciting.
Exactly, it's one of those...
The shape of the bottle.
Exactly.
And it had bits in, which made it feel like it was actually fruit.
Yeah. Well, this might actually be fruit. Who knows?
So this idea of slowness I was interested in, because it's what you were talking about, but it kind of contradicts with your memories of the day as well. The sort of the speed, the rush, the coming in and out, and actually you were sort of talking about the need for a contemplation of food and culture in relation to place, and that object as well, which was about sort of an understanding, which is about time with food.
Yeah, I think eating is so fundamental to us as social beings, and it's kind of how we evolved as humans, and we evolved through the shared problem of how to eat, basically. And we're very good at sharing food because we have to be, otherwise we get thrown out of the band pretty rapidly. Do you know what I mean? So, I think that sense of being around the campfire, as we would have been historically before farming, and sharing food, and the idea that everyone that matters to you is around eating that food at the same time is very, very fundamental. And I think we are still wired up to want that very, very profoundly. I write about what I call the mundane order of life, and I mean, this is actually an idea I came up with 25 years ago when I was studying in Rome. And I was looking at the way people live their everyday lives, but over the course of 2,000 years in this particular neighbourhood of the city. And I was looking at how they, bought food, ate food, loved each other, had babies, got born, died kind of thing. Just the sort of the very, very basic everyday stuff that everybody does. What did the average Joe living in the Rione Sant'Angelo, kind of near the Theatre of Marcellus, eat for breakfast, on an average February day in the year 530? There is zero information because the everyday never gets recorded because it's not special to people, so they don't tend to bother to write it down. I mean, this goes back to your memory thing again. So I came up with this fascinating realisation that the really important stuff, and this is where the word mundane comes in, mundane is a word that we take to mean boring. I'm just doing the mundane stuff like the shopping. But actually, the word mundane, if you think about its root, mundus, this comes from the world, worldly. I mean, it basically means of the world, cosmic. So in that word, you have the beautiful paradox that the stuff that we overlook, because it's not special to us, is the stuff that's profound. And I think that for me is almost what food does more powerfully than anything else, because if we didn't eat, we would simply not be here. Yeah. Therefore, we couldn't exist without food, and because it shapes our entire world, it's too big to see. So we don't see it. But of course, when you take something that's fundamentally important and you treat it as though it's cheap or as though it doesn't matter, then you cheapen everything. So to cheapen food is to cheapen life, basically. And it's quite interesting going back to Oslo, because that is the sort of reason why we're here. And it's interesting seeing that meal, which I now remember.
The little
the trays and slightly freezing outdoors and everything. It's a bit like we were in lockdown already, eating outside on a cold day. But and without, the hosts were lovely and hospitable and everything. This is absolutely no kind of disrespect to them at all, but eating at a conference is very, very difficult, because there's 300 people who have to be fed in 45 minutes, because you want to pack the day with speakers, and it's always a bit of a mare, and yes, there isn't time for the food.
I read a comment by Herbert Wright, who's an English writer who wrote for Blueprint magazine, who was at the conference, mentioning you. It says, Carolyn Steel, the London-based author of Hungry City, made a brilliant case that metropolises have always been physically shaped by food. To reverse the global catastrophe of denatured countryside and industrial food production, she argued that we have to reconnect our cities with food more directly. And I'm just wondering, in the 7 years since, have you noticed anything, this culture, or just more broadly?
First of all, I think climate change is now unignorable. The only person ignoring it is Donald Trump, pretty much, and Bolsonaro. Unfortunately, they're two rather powerful people, but pretty much everyone else has more or less got this. That's great. Thanks, Greta Thunberg. And of course, the relationship with food has become much more visible in that respect. Yeah. So, we see hugely increasing numbers of vegans, for example, in this country. Although, ironically, they're all eating almond milk, and if they knew where almonds came from, they wouldn't be doing that. So, there's a way to go. So I think it's much more visible to people. Of course, COVID has actually accelerated that in many ways, because, the stripped supermarket shelves, oh my God, food doesn't come on a magic carpet after all, somebody actually puts it there. Secondly, being at home and realising that the fact that you've got to eat 3 times a day is actually an opportunity and not a chore. Yeah. Because
even on the way here, I was listening to a podcast, and she goes, and COVID has made us now cook at home and not go out to eat every night. I thought, well, do people really go out every night? Like,
oh yeah,
it was like a glimpse into someone else's mind.
We've been following along the American route, and Americans led the world in terms of eating out. The amount of dollars spent outside the home on food was the highest in the world. And we always follow the States, because we have this weird little, neoliberal special relationship, umbilical cord, horrible relationship with them. Anyway, so yes, it's been a wake-up call for a lot of people, and they discovered that, cooking from scratch and taking time over it and baking your own bread and all the rest of it can actually be joyous.
Yeast and flour sold out like in week 1, I think.
Yeah. Well, that was very interesting as well, because that was partly to do with the fact that, because most of the bread bake was commercial, the sacks were the wrong size, so they were sold in, half a ton sacks kind of thing. They were meant to be sort of sent to commercial bakeries, and they just couldn't literally repurpose into little bags fast enough. So there was plenty of flour. It just wasn't. And often with food, it's about the distribution. It's not about the production. In fact, I would say it's almost the problems that we face are largely distributional.
Yeah,
they're not production. We produce twice as much food as we need on the planet in general, but we also waste nearly half of it.
And one of the phrases that got used, I think I'd heard it more during the first few weeks of COVID than I had ever before, was just in time.
Yeah.
Especially in relation to, this idea of food, like it's packaged or picked or grown just in time, and like that just seems like such a unsustainable way of doing things, because
well, of course,
if it's slightly out of time for whatever reason, you're wasting.
But it's neoliberal as well, because of course what neoliberalism does is it sort of lets the market determine everything, and the ideal cost of production in a capitalist system, as you know, is zero. So anything that can be taken out as a cost is taken out, and storage is a cost.
Have you been to Oslo other than for that, or Norway? You say you're half Finnish, so you know the Scandinavian sort of culture. Is there any of what you're talking about in?
I've been to Stockholm a lot. I've been to Copenhagen a heck of a lot. I mean, I've actually got lots of Danish friends now, and I've been to Finland a fair amount. So Finland is family. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I know the Scandinavian world pretty well. I mean, they're the most advanced societies in the world, basically, in my view, because they're the most equal in terms of gender. They have enormous taxes, which they're actually socialist. They're actually progressively, socialist, or whatever the term is. Well, anyway, they have markets with heavily regulated markets.
I guess they'd be socially democrat.
Social democrats, probably the term,
Which is what annoys me about this country, is when, Labour come up with not that radical suggestions within various manifestos, and suddenly the press or the opposition go, "Oh, this is communist, left-wing socialism."
I know.
If you go to Germany or Norway, else, this is fairly central.
This is normal. No, I know, but we live in a very right-wing society. Witness Brexit, but also witness, neoliberalism. I mean, neoliberalism has had a free run here for 40 years now, which is where all our problems, well, not all our problems, but quite a lot of our problems come from. Yeah. So Scandinavia, to me, and the food partly reflects this. I mean, our rye bread is obviously a crop of the north. And, the fish that we just ate, the salmon, is obviously a fish of the north, and dill is a herb of the north, which was on the salmon, and
you think the speed thing as well, like we were talking about, sort of the speed of life.
They do slow really, really well. In fact, they're very progressive, very forward-looking. They're rich countries. They're egalitarian countries. Yeah, I mean, it's terrible, but ever since Brexit, I've felt like I'm living in an alien society. I just can't believe I live among people who don't want to be part of Europe. I mean, it's like discovering you're living among people who literally think so differently to you. You have nothing in common with them at all. And I funnily enough, I think of myself as primarily European. I mean, not least because I'm half Finnish, and the other half's a smorgasbord of all sorts of stuff. None of which is English, by the way. And most of my work's in Europe. And actually, it's very interesting. I'm much, much better known, for example, in the Netherlands than I am in the UK. And I think it's partly because the stuff I'm talking about is, it's anti-neoliberal, but it's about, embracing culture in many ways. And I think, in Britain over the last kind of couple of decades, we've evolved this sort of really weird vibe that we're kind of somehow above culture, and... So I was kind of going to that. Gosh,
no, I mean,
should we try some of this chocolate?
Oh yeah, no, go for it.
Would you like a cup of tea or something?
I'm good for a drink.
Okay. That's delicious. That's like a picnic.